All right, we'll just give it a few moments for people to come in. From France, hello, how exciting.
Rachel. Hello, Rachel.
Love it. All right, this feels like a pretty solid group. So we will go ahead and get started. Hi everyone. My name is Xochitl Torres. I am the program director for the Arts, Media, and Entertainment Higher Road Training Partnership at the BRIC Foundation. We call it AME HRTP for short, which is a historic new initiative led by BRIC to bridge training and education partners with employment to help underrepresented individuals target high wage, high skill jobs in arts, media, and entertainment. I'm so excited to be moderating today's panel on breaking into the unions. Labor unions are essential to the entertainment industry by providing workers with benefits, resources, and support to be successful in their careers and in this industry. As we all know, the entertainment industry can be very challenging to navigate, especially for this next generation of creatives. So today we will be hearing from our panelists who represent different crafts in the industry. They'll talk about their journeys, how they got to where they are, and how the unions have positively impacted their careers. We have panelists joining from IATSE Local 839, also known as the Animation Guild, yay, which represents artists, writers, technicians, and production workers in the animation industry. And then we have panelists from the Art Directors Guild, which is IATSE Local 800, representing production designers, art directors, assistant art directors, set designers, model makers, illustrators, matte painters, visualization artists, graphic artists, scenics, and title artists in the areas of film and television streaming, commercials, variety, sports, and live entertainment. Whoa. In case you are not aware, IATSE stands for the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, just as a heads up. So I'm going to pass it now to our panelists to introduce themselves. If anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A feature in the Zoom because the chat may be going too quickly, so we might miss some questions. So we will try to leave a few minutes at the end of this to get to those. So I will pass it off to Antonio to introduce yourself. If you could just say your name, your craft, what union you're a part of, and the projects that you're working on now or that you have worked on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Antonio Ferron. I am a member of Local 800, the Art Directors Guild. I am an assistant art director. That's my craft within the guild. Currently, I'm working on the show Bel Air for Peacock. I've been with them for 3 seasons. So I'm their assistant art director. I've art directed some indie films, and I also work as a set designer doing freelance theater work. So I'm designing a couple shows. I have a show opening in Florida next week. I'm doing a show for the LA Fringe Festival. So yeah, set designer, art director, Local 800.
Jose, Dan, anyone?
Yes, sure. I'm Jose Iturriaga. I'm assistant art director and illustrator, specialized in concept art. And I also do some set design, but my craft for the ADG is assistant art director and illustrator. And I joined the union working as a junior set designer, doing some work for unscripted TV shows. So I got the chance to work with on Jeopardy, The Daily Show, and some reality shows here and there, just doing some elements for the sets. But then I wanted to pursue concept art. So I just actually last year I finally got my illustrator card. And I worked as concept artist for the show Outer Range from Amazon Prime, season 2 coming out this May. And yeah, same as Antonio, I also do freelance stuff here and there. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
Hi, I'm Dan Pinto. I'm an illustrator, animator, animation worker, storyboard artist mostly. Based in New York City. I'm part of IATSE's Local 839 Animation Guild. which covers animation workers throughout the animation process. Currently a storyboard artist. In the past, I've worked as a designer, animator, director on a bunch of stuff, mostly preschool stuff your kids like. But yeah, that's that's my life.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here representing your unions. I would love it if we could start at the beginning of your careers. How did you know that you wanted to work in this industry? Where did you get your start? How did you get to where you are today? And then while you share that, if you could share at what point in your career did you hear about unions, that you knew that this was a thing that you could join that would eventually benefit you in your career? Jose, why don't you start? Because we got to
Sure.
talk a little bit about your career a few weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm originally from Mexico, and as a kid, I always loved movies. Anything that had to do with movies, cartoons. I'm a Gen Xer, so and I always wanted to do something that had to do with entertainment, but for reasons unknown, I couldn't at the time when I graduated from college. I'm an industrial designer. So, there wasn't much of an industry for set design and things like that. So I focused on something that I could work right away. So I started doing exhibit design for many years, trade shows and all that stuff. And that led me to move to the US, and eventually, during the pandemic was like kind of the final straw to like arrange my career and focus on working in the entertainment industry. And yeah, the first time I learned about ADG was actually going to WonderCon. I would go to Comic-Con, WonderCon, all those comic book conventions, and there's usually a couple of panels where you get to meet storyboard artists and illustrators and people from ADG. So that's pretty much how I learned about it. I didn't know about the union before that, so that was it.
And can you also share how many years you've been in the union for?
I've only been in the union. It's going to be like 2.5 years, so I'm sort of a newbie, even though I'm not that young.
I wouldn't say that. This is what this panel is about. It is newly initiated members. Dan, do you want to go?
Sure. So in terms of when I first wanted to get into animation was watching cartoons with my dad. Growing up, we watched a bunch of Looney Tunes cartoons. We would always, whenever they put on, like the whole house stopped, kind of just sit down together and watch them. So that really got me interested in the art and the craft of animation. I finally, when I was graduating from my art high school, I remember asking an illustration teacher, I was planning on going into illustration. They said, I'm really torn between illustration and animation. Then they just told me, go with animation. If you learn to animate, it's much more of a, I don't know, like, I guess, crafty kind of thing you can do. Illustration is a little easier to get into, I guess. I don't know. I never really worked as an illustrator, but that's what they told me. So I decided to go with animation. Since graduating in 2000, and I always forget when I graduated, I think 2008. I've pretty much worked since then, so it's about 15 years? No, something like that. Who knows? Yeah, 15 years or so. In that time, I've worked, in a bunch of different positions within animation. I first learned about the union upon graduating college, and I have only been a union member for under a year because of Tim House, New York, where I work, only recently unionized within the past, I don't know, year and a half or so, something like that. So yeah, so brand spanking new union chapter, but also brand spanking new union member.
Awesome. And we will get to talking about the unionization of your workplace in the next question, but just wanted Antonio to go as well.
So yeah, I started, I was a theater kid in high school. So, I was always working on the sets and that kind of stuff, building them and imagining them. And I always knew as a kid that I enjoyed, drawing and visualizing things and designing things. And I also liked architecture. And as you know, I made my way through high school, I realized that that was a thing I could study. I could train to be a set designer and tell stories and combine all of these loves together. So I ended up going to college for set design for theater. And I think that was kind of when I started hearing about unions, because especially in the theater, without union protection, it is a free-for-all. I mean, people are losing their money, you know, taking jobs because of what the jobs are asking them to do. And it was kind of like, if you're not in it, if you don't get in the union, you're kind of like, you have nothing. And so I knew it was a really big deal in college. And then as I started working on independent films also while I was in college and kind of doing the theater and film thing at the same time, I learned that there was also a film union, an art directors union that was separate from the theater union. And I was kind of like, which do I get into? Which direction am I going to go? And by the time I graduated, we were entering pandemic time, and film just seemed like a much better choice for me. And also the union, I think the guild is pretty strong in terms of the wages that we get, in terms of the retirement benefits, health benefits, all of those things. And also LA was gorgeous and I wanted to come out here. And so I think all of that combined was what really, really pushed me to join the guild in film. And so, yeah, I started in theater, ended up in film, but always kind of knew that I was going to be designing sets and visual spaces and storytelling that way. So, yeah.
Nice. I love hearing that everyone, had a similar interest when you were growing up, or when you were in high school, college. You liked art, you were creative, and you pursued your passions, and you were able to make a career out of it, which is really exciting. And I just want to emphasize that there really is no linear path into the entertainment industry. All of your paths are very different. And no one's going to have the same one, because there is no set path. There's so many access points and entry points into this industry, which is really exciting. So I wanted to go around and see if you could each talk about what the initiation process was like to access your respective unions. Did you have to accumulate a certain number of hours? And then in addition to that, did you have a personal, unofficial mentor, or someone that you could just talk to support you during this process? Just because I know that working in this industry isn't easy, and oftentimes it helps to have a mentor to be able to talk things through, to ask any questions, who perhaps has already been through similar experiences.
I guess I'll go. Yeah, I mean, they always say, like, it takes a village, right? And honestly, there's been so many people that kind of guided me through this whole process. I actually got a mentorship during the pandemic from the folks at Rising Up Animation. And that's where I met Vicky Pui, she's an amazing artist. And she actually connected me to and a friend and mentor now, that his name is Drew Long, and he needed help working on some set pieces for a virtual production he was going to do of an animated short. And at the same time, several years ago, when I was at this was Comic-Con, I met Jerry Sonnenberg, who's an art director, and he's at the union as well. And we started talking, and eventually, he connected me to some people that needed, a junior set designer. That's how I started, working on unscripted shows. And yeah, I had to accumulate, I believe it was 30 days, or 30 working days on the same show, because that's the tough part, like trying to get at least 30 days on the same show, because sometimes, especially if you're doing concept art or things that are a little like on a faster pace, you might not get the whole 30 days. But I was able to get that, and I joined as assistant art director. And then last year on that show I mentioned, Outer Range, I started working 3 weeks, and they were kind of like testing me, because I was kind of like a newbie, and that ended up being 3 months. So I guess they liked it, and I was like, yeah. So I was able to get the double card at the ADG. Yep.
Great. Antonio, we'll go to you, because then Dan has a more specific version to talk about this.
Yeah, so similar to Jose, I had to get 30 days to actually be a member of the guild. In terms of mentors, I don't think I really had, that's a lie, I did have a consistent mentor. But I feel like I kind of pulled together a network of mentor-like figures as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Just as I took on jobs and met people, I always just tried to stay in contact, be nice, see how I could help, however, and I think that really helped in terms of getting people to realize that I really cared about, doing the work and that I was really invested in joining the guild and, doing bigger projects and, getting my feet wet, so to speak. And so I think with that, just staying in touch with a lot of the people that I respected that I worked with, they kind of all became mentors at different phases of when I was kind of working through getting into the guild, whether it was just putting me in contact with people they knew or saying, you should apply for this program. So our guild has a production design initiative program, and that's basically a program that lets the guild get to know who you are and gets you in touch with productions that you can work for, and hopefully through that, someone will try to move you up into a guild position. And then I did have one mentor from the first film. I did a Netflix show in Pittsburgh right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was the PA and the production designer for that. We were just really, really close, and we still talk to this day. And every now and then she checks up on me and she's like, if you're not working, let me know and I'll try to get you in contact with someone. But I think ultimately it was just letting people know, what you're about, showing them your stuff, not being too shy about it. And just really, yeah, putting yourself out there felt like the main thing that I had to do. And then maneuvering the union system just in terms of figuring out, like, how am I going to get those 30 days, kind of like what Jose said. In film specifically, we have PAs, right? And so sometimes as a PA, you start doing this work that's like kind of guild related. So they're like, make sure you get in touch with the guild because you don't want the production company to be, I guess, using you as a scab, basically, right? Because then that's a way for you to kind of show the guild, be like, hey, I'm doing this work. We should talk to the production, because a lot of times the production doesn't want to pay for a union worker. They'd rather have a PA pseudo do the work, which is not okay, right? And so just being vocal about the things that you do and want to do. And then I think that's kind of the easiest way, and because then you have people who are in the guild helping you along, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I just want to go into someone who asked a question, because I think this follows those lines. They asked that they just got a PA role on an animation studio that's part of the union, which congratulations. But they wanted to know how they find out if their role is covered under the union, and how long do they need to be employed in the animation studio to join the union. So the latter part of the question is, I believe it is 30 days. How to find out about your role being covered under the union. Can one of my experts potentially answer that?
Yeah, so production is actually interesting because the Animation Guild has been expanding into production work more recently. Titmouse LA, Titmouse New York started, we were the first animation union to include production in our bargaining unit. And so that opened the door for other productions to other production workers to join in their respective studios. Currently, I still think it's a case-by-case basis, depending on what studio you're in, whether the production workers in that studio are covered or not. So, for instance, I think Nickelodeon production workers just got covered. I think the Rick and Morty folks just got covered. And Solar Opposites as well. So you can check in. You can contact someone at TAG, asking them about whether or not your studio production workers are covered. If they're not, you can email organize@tag839.org and begin the process of organizing your workforce. To the other point of how many hours, the Animation Guild doesn't have minimum hours for becoming a union worker. The second you start working, you are a union worker. There are minimum hours, I believe, for health benefits and the pension, but that's a different story. And again, I would reach out to your TAG organizers or your TAG union membership, union leadership to ask about that, or your TAG rep, I guess.
Thank you for
Um,
answering that. And kind
yeah.
of wanted to segue into you talking more about your experience, since it was a little bit different with the union, how you established your union in New York with Titmouse.
Yeah, so Titmouse, New York was the first animation union outside of LA County to organize under Tag 839. It's the first animation union in New York, depending on who you ask and what your timeline is, in between 20 and 30 years, depending on what you count the I forgot what the local was, but there was an animation union in New York that folded sometime in the 80s or 90s. Um, so yeah, so my process for initiating into the union was that we had to organize our workforce. So myself and a bunch of folks at the studio did the work of talking to our coworkers, asking them what their wants were, whether they felt they were represented fairly with the company, and whether they wanted to be part of a union. We got a resounding yes from those questions. I think over 90% of our unit voted yes on the on our vote to unionize. So that was our initiation process, essentially 2 years worth of work to get to a process where we had, from starting conversations to a final union contract, was about 2 years. Yeah, and in terms of mentorship, since that was part of the question earlier, um, for organizing our workplace, we definitely had representatives from TAG who helped us, got us along the way. Dennis Fate and Leslie Simmons were two of the big ones. But there's and in terms of my like both Jose and Antonio said, there's lots of coworkers that you can talk to regarding these things. I know for me, trying to get into storyboarding, a lot of my time when I was working as a designer or an animator or some other role on an animation production, I would spend my lunches bothering the storyboard artist to ask how to become a storyboard artist. What do you do? How does it work? All that kind of stuff. Until one of them finally gave me a shot at storyboarding on a show, and that sort of got the ball rolling in terms of me staying on as a storyboard artist.
Yeah, I think you all touched on a great point about how to leverage your network and those relationships that you have. Being kind goes a long way, and just, oftentimes frequently reaching out to your connections, just letting them know how you're doing, what you've been up to, and being honest about where you need help and support, whether that be another connection or an opportunity. So I think that that's really great that you all had someone or a group of people that you could talk to in this capacity. So now that you're all in the union, newly initiated, what has your experience been like being part of it? What benefits have you received? Health benefits, 401k? Do you find that there's more stability? Do you have more support?
I'll go. So it's
First.
yes, I know, right? It's very, very interesting. I mean, for me, it was a whole new environment. I didn't know a whole lot about unions and how they work, and I still learning because there's so much information and things that you need to know. But the cool thing is that you always have people that have been there for years that are able to help you if you have any questions. Uh, it's just like you just have to put some time on it and like dedicate yourself to like learn a little bit and read all the documents that you get and all the information that you can find on at least on the ADG. We have like the website. There's a lot of information that helps you understand a few things, but as I said, you can always call and there's always somebody that can help you out. So that's a great plus. And as far as benefits, I mean, there's different things. I mean, healthcare obviously it's a big plus because you get great coverage and there's definitely options for that. You have to accumulate some hours, to be able to get your benefits. There's also other perks that are the union has worked with several organizations to get anything from credits, loans, mortgages, and retirement plans. They even have some like a hardship support, and especially when things like last year with the strikes. And there's always it feels to be part. You're part of this big family of people that can get together and help out. Like you're not alone. Like it's, I mean, I've worked for as a freelancer for many years, and it's, if something goes wrong, it's like, I mean, you're on your own. So it's great to have an organization that's already, walked that path, and they're being paved the way for you to be successful. So in my case, it's been very helpful. Right now, last year was tough because of the strikes, and that kind of has spilled over to this year, and we're still recovering, but hopefully things will get better. And I think it's been great being part of that union and having that support in my case.
Yeah, and I'll jump in right after and say, yeah, the last couple of years in terms of work consistency have been obviously shaky, considering pandemic, post-pandemic, and then into the writer's strike and stuff that we had. So I would say that paints a kind of skewed picture of my experience personally, because I've only been in the guild also about 2 years. But at the same time, I do think, similar to the mentorship question, I think leaning on your network and leaning on your guild is probably the most important part of actually getting that more consistent work. I think the work fluctuates for us in terms of how much is actually there. So I think really what it is the more active you stay in the network and the more active you stay in your guild, the more it does for you. I don't think it's one of those things where if you just kind of go to work and then leave, that it'll get you another job. Well, it will, because if you meet people, they'll get you another job, right? But you have to basically engage with the guild, I think, for the guild to give things back to you, if that makes sense. And also the healthcare is good, pension is good. Those things are great. I didn't grow up with great healthcare, so my parents were asking me if they could join my healthcare, which I'm still looking into if that's like an option. Because they were like, "This is great. We want your healthcare." So that's a great benefit, and that's not something you have to put effort into. Once you're in the guild, you get that. You work your certain number of hours, you get that. But in terms of, I'd say, work consistency in those kinds of things, a lot of it is networking, and we have directories on our website. We have production listings, and they're always open for members to take a look at and reach out to people. Going to union events, I think those events are really, really helpful. There's really awesome people that put events together, and so you get to meet the people who are more engaged in the guild, and then therefore more engaged in helping the members and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think generally it's a positive experience. I would say everyone get into a guild when you start working if you can. Unions are great.
Speaking to the benefits, the interesting thing about TAG is TAG LA has what's called an MPI, which is a multi-producer. I always forget what the I stands for, but basically a partnership between producers, so they can all pay in together into the pension and the insurance fund that then spreads those benefits to the membership. TAG New York doesn't have that. We have a separate contract, and because there's only one unionized studio in TAG New York currently, Titmouse, New York, we don't have, the TAG doesn't pay for our health insurance or our pension or anything like that. Luckily, Titmouse New York does have a pretty robust health insurance and 401k option, so we do that instead. In terms of the benefits we do get, though, for Titmouse New York, obviously our working conditions are protected. Our overtime is guaranteed if you need it. One of the big things was protecting against scope creep, which is a big issue that we're having, in that folks who are working one sort of specialization were tasked to do other things that were sort of outside that specialization, and the more you do that, the more companies want more of that. Once storyboarders start timing out their storyboards, now everyone's expected to time out their storyboards, and so storyboard timers don't exist anymore. Now it's just on the storyboarders to do it all. And there's things like that, similar things like that in design and animation, all sorts of things. in terms of the changes we felt, at least that I felt, post, not even unionizing, post just having those conversations when we were organizing, was a feeling of camaraderie that I hadn't felt before in any studio I'd worked for. The conversations were so honest and so, intense in terms of really listening to people over what they wanted and what they feared about, losing their job or not being able to keep up with the demands of how much they were being asked, what they could accomplish in a 40-hour work week and all that kind of stuff. So hearing those things from folks and having those conversations really created for me a sense of community that I hadn't felt before. And I still feel like it's it's much stronger than it was when I started, even though we were doing it all virtually and we didn't see each other face to face. Like there's friends I've made via the organizing process that I still have not met face to face. It was just all so virtual.
Thanks, Dan. And three of you mentioned the demands and the working hours of your jobs and the support that you're getting from the union. And some people have been asking in the Q&A about negotiations and how the contracts are about to expire. And just wanted to ask, on a personal level, what do you hope comes out of these negotiations for your respective unions?
I can talk this real brief because the tag negotiations are happening in a few months' time. I think it's June, actually. It might be that soon. Someone can look that up and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's happening soon. And one of the big things that tag is fighting against is we're not fighting against, but trying to curtail in some way is AI. A lot of the artists who work in animation are very, very weary and hesitant to have any sort of AI intrude in our workforce. Not only because it takes away jobs, but because it's often sourced unethically from artists who don't allow that their artwork to be sourced in those scraping programs that drag up that are used to create AI art. So that's a big one that we're hoping for. In general, there's a lot of stuff happening with rates. Scope creep is always a big thing. I can't think of some of the others, but one of the things that's interesting in this case is that the TAG LA contract is up. The TAG New York contract still has another 2 years before it expires. But whatever TAG LA wins in this contract is leverage for us in our next negotiation session. So sort of, rising tide raises all boats kind of. So I, for one, and hopefully the entirety of the Tim House New York is cheering for the TAG LA to really get a strong contract this year and fight for the protections we need as animation workers so that they get the protections they need, but also when next year comes or when our next negotiations come around, we can point to that contract and say, hey, we need these same things.
Yeah, and in case of our guild, yeah, our contract is also up for renegotiation this year. I believe it expires in July, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting because before I joined the guild, I was, as I mentioned, I was working doing as a junior set designer, and I was doing some shows that were obviously union, but I was trying to get into the union at that time, and that was when the previous contract was being renegotiated. So I'm still, learning all the ins and outs of what that involves, and but I think there was a lot of support last year for the writers and the actors, and there was an event, I think it was like last week, where there were a lot of other unions supporting ours now with this new renegotiation. So hopefully, I'm pretty sure everybody wants to just like go back to work, and hopefully things will run smoothly, because some of the topics were the same, like streaming services and how that's affecting our jobs, and artificial intelligence. Those are two of the topics that I know they want to tackle as well. So hopefully, if everybody comes together, things hopefully will run smoothly this time around. We'll see how that goes, but yeah. I mean, it's always a challenge, but that's power numbers. Is, as I said, you know, when you're freelancing, you're on your own, and you're like, you don't have like any leverage whatsoever. So in this case, you have all these groups of people, and you know, all the other unions that are also supporting you. I think that's the big difference between, you know, trying to you go into your boss's office to ask for a raise versus, you know, having a union and a full system that is actually supporting you. So
Yeah, I think the 13 Hollywood unions under AOTC are all just began their negotiations, I think, earlier this month, and our contracts expire July 1st. And so now is kind of our big, you know, negotiation push. And hopefully, my biggest hope is that a deal is reached and that the employers aren't terrible and we don't have to go on a strike come July 1st. That's my biggest hope. But I think in terms of what I am mostly thinking about and the people I'm talking to are thinking about, AI is definitely a huge topic, especially for the illustrators and graphic artists, being able to make sure that their work isn't going to completely be handed off to a computer, and that, you know, their job isn't resigned to one person clicking, you know, yes or no to you know, a typed in prompt. And so I know that's a huge concern. In terms of the Hollywood 13 altogether, I know pay equity is a big topic. A lot of the traditionally female heavy crafts get paid significantly less than the predominantly male crafts. And so just making sure that, you know, there's pay equity among the crafts and among the positions. Just because you're a costume designer doesn't mean you need to get paid a tenth of what, you know, a cinematographer is paid when you've been working for the same amount of time and put the same amount of effort into something, and your creative visions are both seen on screen. I don't see how that's equitable. So yeah, things like that are my biggest things. And, you know, just all the ways that companies try to cut corners, whether it's, you know, doubling up days and saying that, you know, we're going to shoot 2 episodes on the same day, but it's technically one company. And it's like, okay, well, if we're doing the work of 2 episodes in one day, either don't do that or pay us the rate of 2 days. You know what I mean? So like all the ways that they try to cut corners, they're moving productions overseas, trying to get minimum staffing. American productions should be, you know, should have a certain number of American workers being used, even if you're going overseas, those kinds of things. And those are some of the protections that the writers, I think, got in their last round, where like they can't take a show overseas without bringing American showrunners. They have to, you know what I mean? So things like that. And I don't think everything happens all at once. I don't think that's how contract negotiations go. But even just getting the initial language out there, we actually had like a union thing this morning, just like a little I don't know what you call it. I guess kind of like a panel thing. A guy came and talked to us about it, and he was like, you know, even if we start to get the language in there that starts to protect us and that can be built on in the future, like how the writers got with AI, or the writers and actors kind of, they have vague language about AI in their contracts right now. But even starting there at least, and then when you negotiate in 2 or 3 years, we're gonna ask for more. You know what I mean? So being able to just build on all those little shortcuts that they try to take around us.
Yes, it all has to start somewhere. And, you know, I think ideally we would not like to strike because everybody needs to get back to work. But at the same time, we want to make sure that all of our workers are protected and that they're getting what they are asking for and what they're demanding for in these negotiations. So I wanted to pivot a little bit. Since there are people here who are trying to break into the industry, who want to get to work, can you recommend some entry-level positions in your crafts that someone could start to do to start working in this industry?
PAing for film and in the art department, definitely reaching out to what I did was I found films that I really liked, films and TV shows that I really liked, and I went on IMDb and I found who the production designers and art directors were, and I Googled their names, and if I could find their email, they got an email from me. So at the first level, you know, that's something you can do. And the PA is an entry level position. You know, you're filling the crafty room for them, and you know, grabbing papers and that kind of stuff. But from there, you can grow and build your skills and crafts. And you know, once you're around the people, you kind of get closer to what you actually want to do. So.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, yeah, no, I was going to mention the same thing as Antonio, because from my understanding, because my case was, you know, unique, and I, you know, it was, yeah, it was a unique case. So I already had experience in a different industry, so I kind of like pivoted that towards the entertainment industry. So that kind of helped a little bit, instead of like starting, you know, probably as a PA. But everybody I talked to, they basically tell me like, yeah, you start as a PA, and then you'll find whatever you're interested in, and then just branch out. So that's only my comment on that, because yeah, as I said, my experience was really weird and unique.
Within animation, there's a lot of positions have junior positions. So, or there used to be. I mean, there still are, but you know, there's oftentimes an entry level thing, sort of like there's a design lead, then there's a designer, and then sometimes there's a junior designer. So those junior ones are those junior positions are often intended for people who are newer into the industry, to get in, and get their foot in the door in terms of the industry. If you're talking about storyboard, particular, oftentimes storyboard revisionist positions are not necessarily easier, but more open to entry level folks, because it's a less, like, I guess, time consuming. That's not the correct word, but the decision making is sort of lesser for you. You're kind of following a lead a little bit more. It's sort of a good way into understanding how boards work, how they end up getting timed and into a finished, a finished timed animatic. But in general, what I would say is the same thing these other two gentlemen have said, is that, you know, essentially bothering folks until they hire you, right? Like, cold calling studios, cold emailing studios, on social media, following folks who are part of the industry you want to be a part in, and messaging them and asking them questions about, like, how did you get in? Is your studio looking for folks? Can I show you my portfolio? Can I get feedback on it? Folks are willing to hire people who are good at what they do, and it doesn't really matter how many years you have in the industry. It matters, can you do the work, can you do it on time, and you kind of not be a jerk while you do it.
And Dan, would you mind sharing some entry-level roles for designers in animation?
Yeah, there used to be a lot more. Like, one of the issues with how um studios are sort of being more and more stingy with their budgets is there used to be design leads, designers, and junior designers, and or even assistant designers or things like that. There used to be more of a hierarchy in terms of the amount of work being divvied out. So a lead designer would plan out broad strokes things, then the individual designers would take those and work on them a little bit more, and pass off some of the more grunt work to, like, you know, more entry level things, a colorist or what used to be called a junior designer, or a design assistant to help out with it. But they're hard. Fewer and far between of those positions exist nowadays, but they still do exist. You have to just, like, ask studios if they have them. But that being said, even an entry level person can be hired as a designer. It would be very hard for an entry level person to be hired as a design lead. It requires an amount of, like, director kind of capabilities that a lot of times folks don't know how to, if they haven't been in the industry long enough, they don't know how to navigate that sort of way of talking, way of planning, and that kind of stuff.
Awesome. You all kind of talked about this a little bit, about, you know, you accumulate the hours, you have your experience, your contacts, your networking. What are other things other than, you know, PAing that people could start to do to better prepare themselves to eventually join a union? Or in Dan's case, if, you know, your workplace doesn't have a union, what are things that you can start to do now to get to that point?
I think one main thing would be to, oh, sorry, Antonio. You want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
No, one thing that in my case, I think worked great was learning as much as possible as I could about the union beforehand. And the way I did it was, as I mentioned earlier, attending events like WonderCon or Comic Con or all of these events. I mean, it's not just for like, fans and the actors. If you look, a lot of those shows have smaller panels that are focusing on industry, and you'll see artists and creators, telling you their stories. And if you talk to them, they can share their experience in the unions and all that. And I think that's definitely something that would help learn what crafts are covered by what unions. And I'm sure Dan can talk more about this, but if you want to create or want to bring your show into a union or create your own union or whatever, don't go blindly into battle, because you're gonna get squashed. There's a lot of people that have worked for many, many years, decades, to create the unions and the benefits that a lot of us have now. So talk to them, and they're more than willing. ADG has a booth usually at Comic-Con or at Lightbox Expo, and I believe the Animation Guild does as well. So you can just come over and talk to people, and they're definitely going to be able to help you, to answer all those little questions that you might have, or things that you would like to know. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I was gonna say basically similar, learning as much as you can is always kind of the first step. I like to think of like, getting into these guilds or getting into any kind of creative position. It's like half of it is the networking part of it, and half of it is just, knowing your craft really well. So I learned a lot of stuff on YouTube. Classes can be really expensive. Not everyone can afford, super fancy schools or whatever. Obviously, that's always helpful on a resume. But YouTube is great. YouTube can teach you almost anything now. And a lot of programs that I used when I was in school had great student discounts when you were downloading the program. Some of them, if you're working with or if you're trying to use a really small software company, some of them, if you email them, if you can't tell, I email people a lot. If you email them, sometimes you're like, hey, I don't have much money. I'm a student. Can you give me an access code or discount? And some of them, they'll say yes. They'll be like, hey, here's a 90-day free trial. We're happy to support you. So just being bold about getting in touch with people and just making sure that you know as much as you can about the thing that you're trying to do. One little helpful tip, I feel like my dog is making noise, I'm sorry. I feel like we're all visual people here, right? And so when you're getting hired or trying to get hired by people who are interested in visual things, if I'm sending an email, obviously I add my portfolio, but one thing I like to do is just have a photo in the body of the email. So when they get down to that thank you, there's a really pretty picture at the end that actually makes them want to open my portfolio, right? And so if you're even going to a networking event, right, if you come with a portfolio, have a pretty picture on the front, right? Just present yourself as the visual storyteller or whatever that you are, and be kind. And I think that's kind of the way to go. But obviously it's hard, there's no job application button usually for a lot of this stuff. So I understand it's very difficult to figure out where to go and how to do it, but be bold and pushy but not annoying.
Sometimes you got to be annoying. That's the rough part. To jump on that same point, one of the other sources that I find really helpful were a lot of libraries will have, as part of their um, uh, 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 resources. Oftentimes they have memberships to things like Skillshare or things like that, where you can get classes, anything from like learning a new language, but some of them include things like storyboarding or design or painting, anything like that, right? So that's always a thing. I agree that looking into what a union offers and what the how the union operates in general was a great thing to prepare you to join the union. I know TAG, for instance, publishes our minimum wage guides on their website, so you have a good idea of how much money you could make, or how much you should be charging clients, things like that, and a lot of other info is at the TAG website. In terms of the last question, the one that made my eyes light up, how to start a union. Jose was correct. Going into it blind is a pathway towards failure. The best bet is to do some research. Contact if you're working in an animation field, contact the animation guild. If you're working in a film field and don't know which guild protects your craft specifically, contact IATSE. If you're working in a field outside of film, television in general, and don't know who to contact, the AFL-CIO is a great resource. They are sort of an umbrella union for the entire United States that covers a whole lot of different working classifications. My friend Rachel posted in chat about reading the work of Jane McAlevey, who's a wonderful organizer who's helped organize lots of workplaces and has published essentially the workbook on how to do it. It is a long process. Again, our unionizing effort took 2 years essentially to do, from initial talks to a final signed contract. It is a long process, it's a difficult process, but unions are out there to help you accomplish that. If you're an animation worker, Animation Guild is actively looking to expand. If you're working at a studio that's not covered by the Animation Guild, they will talk to you. Organize at tag839.org. Yeah, do it. It's worth doing.
Thank you for sharing who Rachel was, because I kept seeing Rachel responding to a lot of the Q&As, and honestly, Rachel should have moderated this panel because it was really insightful with everything that she was including in there. And someone asked for establishing a union in your workplace, how many people do you need to be considered a union, and approximately how much did it cost?
It doesn't cost anything to organize other than your time. It takes a lot of time to do it. Again, depending on how big your shop is. For instance, a Puerto Rican animation studio just organized, and I think their unit is 12 people. So it can be fairly small. Our studio we organized was about 115, I think. So it's again, those things are different. What was the other part of that question? How much does it cost? Is nothing.
How much does it cost, and how many people do you need?
How many people? There's no minimum to how many people. I think. I mean, I don't think you can organize one person. Like you can't be a one-person union. But if there's 2 of you and a boss, then maybe you can. Again, it's worth reaching out to a union to ask if they have minimums. Perhaps I don't think they would. But you do need. If you're tasked to vote on the union, you do need a majority of the people to vote on it. So if it's whatever 100 people and 20 people don't vote yes to unionize, then whatever. If only 20 people vote yes to unionize, then your union is essentially not recognized by the company. You ideally want more than 80% to create a union.
Well, and now that we're talking a little bit about costs, some people have been asking if you could share in the initial process of when you are becoming a union member, did you have to pay a fee? If so, do you feel comfortable sharing what that was? Is it a fee that you only pay once? You pay every year?
I'm happy to answer that one. The Art Directors Guild was expensive to join as an art director or an assistant art director. Currently, the cost is around $10,000, not upfront. So there's different payment plans and stuff, and then there's also quarterly dues of about $400. The caveat to that is when you're working, the money that you make over the course of a couple months working for the guild should be able to make up for that, union fee, quarterly fee easily. You know what I mean? I don't stress about that $400 quarterly fee or my payment plan for my initiation fee. It's kind of rolled over together. But as soon as basically, you know, as soon as I realized that I wanted to join the guild, and I was like, how do I do that? And talk to people about it. They're like, just so you know, like the initiation fee is $10,000 and they're going to ask for this amount up front. I think it was like 4,000 something. And then the rest is on. I was like, this is crazy insane. And so I like, that's a good thing to know about a guild that you're entering into, you know? And I know that our guild has like a pretty cool like finance office, I guess you can call it, that you can reach out to if you're having trouble paying for things. Like during the strike, I didn't pay my dues, and they were like, cool, and I was like, great. So there's usually, again, emailing, sending an email can go pretty far, or giving a call can usually go pretty far. But yeah, I'd say look into how much the guild that you want to join or the union that you want to join actually costs. And for me, I basically was just like, okay, I'm just gonna save up because I didn't want that to be an obstacle for me joining the union. I've heard from some people that it's never been an obstacle for them if they didn't have the money in the moment, that they could have, you know, talked to someone and made it work because they were performing the job, right? If you work 30 days in a position, right, that is covered by the union, you are entered into that union. And I think there's some kind of legal protection around like whether or not they can actually kick you out because you haven't paid or something like that. I don't actually know the specifics of it. Sorry. But the point is, look into what your union requires as soon as you know that you want to join one, and I guess try to save up. Eliminate as many obstacles as you can so that, you know, an employer isn't like, well, this person doesn't qualify or whatever. No, I got my $4,000. I did the job. I have the skills. I know the people. Give me my health insurance.
Well, and I think that's really great advice also to share for people who are starting out very early in their career, looking to work in this industry. If you want to join a union, know that it can be expensive and something to start saving up for if that is what you would like. Dan, you assuming you did not have a similar experience?
No, so the Animation Guild waives initiation costs for new chartered studios. So because Titmouse New York organized, our initiation fee was waived for the members who were at the studio presently upon unionizing. There is still a quarterly fee. Ours is slightly lower than LA's because of the nature of our contract. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what that is. But there is, if for anyone new to the union, who isn't in a newly chartered studio and thus have their initiation fee waived, the initiation fee is 2 weeks pay at the lowest tier within your classification. So that means, say the minimum for a designer's whatever, 1,900 a week. You owe 2 times that upon joining the union. That being said, the Animation Guild is very lenient about payment plans, and as I've heard most unions are, the Animation Guild allows you to pay that over time in various payment plans. You reach out to the membership folks, and they'll figure out some way to help you through that. That sort of stuff membership dues can be paused during times of unemployment. Obviously, you're not in while you're in the guild, you're not in the guild when you're unemployed. So yeah, there's that. But I don't know if I assume that answers the question.
It does. And I just want to be mindful that we are at time. So thank you all so much for this riveting conversation. And for everyone else who is attending, we highly encourage you to attend the 4 p.m. The Ask Me Anything. If there are any questions that you didn't have answered in any of the panels today, please, we welcome you to join that one. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate all of your advice and expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.